Welcome, everybody. The Hearing Loss Prevention and Hearing Testing webinar for ACSAFE Safety Association, BC Arts and Entertainment Industry. You're in the right place. So I need to set the intention a bit today for us. We always want to be sure to create a safe space for everybody's learning exchange to happen, and we want to support each other in that learning exchange. I want you to know that we welcome any questions throughout this workshop, but we're going to leave time at the end of the workshop to address those questions in a Q&A answer period. We need to start off, of course, with our Indigenous Territory Land Acknowledgement. ACSAFE Safety Association would like to acknowledge and honor that our workplace and classrooms are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Kwakiutl, Stolo, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Stumanis peoples. Thank you for that. We always got to get started with a little bit of housekeeping, of course. I want you to know that this session is intended to last for the full 60 minutes today, followed by a 15-minute Q&A, open kind of conversation period. During the presentation, all participants will be muted. We do have a chat function where you're able to submit those questions. They will be saved there and then addressed at the end. And there is a recording of this webinar. We will make it available on our website, and it will have a link that is emailed to you within a week. For your convenience, the closed captioning function is available for this webinar. Simply select your settings and then accessibility. Under closed captioning, check the checkbox to enable it. And if you have any issues, please advise our team in the chat room. We do have somebody monitoring that chat throughout this presentation. So to start off, we do want to present ourselves. My name is Dorian Mash. If you don't know me already, I'm the Interior Safety Advisor for ACSAFE Safety Association. I have about 16 years experience in the arts and entertainment industry with a huge background in entertainment rigging, firefighting, industrial safety, and emergency safety. And I am a certified occupational health and safety professional. And I am joined today by two lovely guests, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Sasha, take it away.
Great, thank you. So I'm Sasha Brown, and I am an occupational audiologist at WorkSafe BC. I've been at WorkSafe since 2000 in a bunch of different roles as an audiologist. I'm also a professor at the University of British Columbia, where I teach audiology in the Faculty of Medicine and do a bunch of other things around noise and hearing loss. So I think I'm in the right place today. And thank you for having me. And I should mention that I'm coming to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Quw'utsun people.
Thank you. Tara.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name's Tara Bissell, and I'm here on behalf of SureHire Occupational Testing. We are a North American-based company with a heavy presence in Western Canada. We offer various occupational health testing services, such as audiometric testing. Our purpose is to build a safe, healthy and productive workforces and communities. And I am a industrial audiometric technician. I've been certified since 2013, both in Alberta and in BC. And my current role at SureHire is the manager of our Canadian National Network partnership, as well as our mobile testing division.
Awesome. Thank you for being here to both of you. To get you a little more familiarized with ACSAFE, we need to go ahead and introduce them as well. ACSAFE Safety Association is a non-for-profit health and safety association supporting BC arts and entertainment industries. For the past 25 years, ACSAFE's collaborated with the associations, unions, and government agencies to proudly support over 3,000 employers and about 60,000 workers in BC. We are always here to provide information relevant to the best practices around your health and safety, and that's always going to be specific to the arts and entertainment industry. We do have a vision. British Columbia has the safest and healthiest arts and entertainment workplace in the world, and it shows. We do have a mission to prevent and eliminate workplace injury, illness, and death, providing world-class occupational health and safety and well-being programs to employers, supervisors, and workers in the BC arts and entertainment industry. To get kicked off here, I do want to let you know what our learning objectives are for today. We're going to be able to identify some causes, risks, and prevention strategies for noise-induced hearing loss in the workplace. And those are going to be following the WorkSafe BC guidelines. We're going to evaluate hearing protection devices' effectiveness and noise reduction ratings. We'll be able to identify the key elements and hearing conservation programs and what they require. We're going to recognize common industry-specific tasks that contribute to noise-induced hearing loss. We're going to be able to understand some of the possible control measures to reduce those risks of noise-induced hearing loss. And lastly, we're going to assess the benefits of hearing testing in monitoring occupational health and safety, hearing, and ensure early detection of hearing loss. These are the discussion topics that we'll go through today in order. It's going to be noise-induced hearing loss and noise, moving on to noise testing and time-weighted averages. Then we're going to dive into some elements of a hearing conservation program, talk about those industry-specific noise reduction strategies, move into hearing protection devices and their ratings, and wrap it up with some benefits of hearing testing. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to hand it on over to Sasha at WorkSafe BC.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think, Dorian, you were in charge of the slides. I'll get you to just go right into how do we hear. So in order to understand what noise does to the ear, it does make sense that we need to know how we hear to begin with. And this is sort of a nice simple picture of the ear. And what we can see here is that I don't have a pointer, so I can't point at the screen, but we can see, so noise goes into the ear with our pin, our outer ear here, goes into the ear canal, and then it vibrates the eardrum, which sits in a sort of a taut way at the end of this ear canal. The eardrum vibrates because the sound waves are hitting it. And when the eardrum vibrates, it sets these three little bones behind it into vibration as well. They're tiny, tiny little bones. Those three bones then send that sound vibration, that signal, into what we call the cochlea, which is that snail-like system there. You'll also see that there are some semicircular canals, and those are for balance. So the system of balance and hearing is one organ, but today we'll just be talking about our hearing, the actual cochlea part, the little bit that looks like a snail. So when when the sound comes in, that little foot plate, the last of those three bones, really kind of pumps and sets some motion into that cochlea. And we'll go on to the next slide here. And so this is a more complex picture, but to show that this cochlea, which is really about the size of a pea, or they always say a pea, it's actually probably about the size of a lentil. It's a little smaller than a pea, and it's got like hundreds of thousands of moving parts in it. So it's really, really, really complex. But the kind of thing to understand is that there are sensory cells within the cochlea that when they are triggered, when they vibrate, they send an electric signal along our auditory nerve, goes up to our brain, and we interpret that as sound. When they are healthy, they look like the pictures on the bottom. That's an actual photo of what these hair cells actually look like. If you want to go to the next slide, please. And you can see now, looking on the left, that's what they look like when they're healthy. Over on the right, this is after exposure to noise. So when these hair cells are exposed to noise, especially over time, they can become kind of clumped. They fall over, they don't get back up again. And that is permanent damage. There is no way to regenerate or restore these hair cells. When they are gone, we lose that ability to hear at the sound that those hair cells are specifically hear and pass along. So there's no fixing it. There are other parts of the ear that can be fixed, that can be surgically repaired. Those three little bones in the middle ear, for example, our eardrum. So there are types of hearing loss where we can intervene and actually fix it after the fact. But when we're talking about hearing loss caused by noise, once the damage has happened, it is permanent and there's no coming back from it. If you'd like to, next slide, please. So this is again that cochlea. And really, I just want to point out that on the left, it's again very healthy. On the right, where that blue section is, that's the area that gets damaged with noise exposure. So it's a very specific part of the cochlea. Now, the relevance of this is that the cochlea is actually really kind of cleverly set up such that it's what we call tonotopic, which different parts of the cochlea respond to different pitches or different frequencies of sound that come in. And so when the base of the cochlea is for very high pitch sounds, and then as we start to curve around, it gets into low pitch sounds. By the time we get to the tip, it's very, very low frequency, like bass type sounds. So when we look at the damage caused by noise, it is right around that first wall of the cochlea. So we would anticipate that somebody with a hearing loss caused by noise, that they would have really good hearing in the high frequencies, then some hearing loss in those mid to high frequencies, and then again, very good hearing in the low frequencies. So it's a very specific kind of hearing loss that we see when it is only caused by noise. And these are some different representations you see here. Either it can just be something that's a number, which is more common when you see like the industrial audiometric testing. And we're really looking at this 3,000 to 6,000 hertz. So again, frequencies, but we're looking at the hair cells that correlate to those frequencies. And so we pay attention to that because it lets us know that there might be a hearing loss that is consistent with noise exposure. And then there are different representations of it below as well. I'll just draw your attention a little bit without, belaboring the point too much. But on the bottom right, there's a picture. It's the audiogram. It's got some sounds on it. They're really small, so it's kind of hard to see. But the idea is that anything above the line that represents the hearing loss are sounds that we would not be able to hear. Anything below it, we can hear. So somebody with a noise-induced hearing loss would be able to hear, for example, a lawnmower. It's a nice low frequency sound. They've got great hearing in the low frequencies. But something like bird singing or somebody whispering would be more difficult to hear because those are high frequency sounds and those are the damaged hair cells. Those also correlate to speech sounds. So somebody with this kind of hearing loss would be able to hear vowel sounds, lots of ah, oh, with these low frequency, this low pitch energy, but probably not be able to hear some of the higher frequency pitches that are more of our consonants, like T and F and SH and these hissy sounds. Those are very high frequency in nature, high pitch, and so would get missed. So what we often hear when somebody has a noise-induced hearing loss is that it sounds like everybody is mumbling. They kind of hear that rumble of the vowels, but don't get all that information to actually help them figure out what the words are. If you want to go on to the next one, please. So that's kind of the, the physiological impact of noise on the ear. But there are other impacts of noise-induced hearing loss as well, beyond just simply not being able to hear. And as you can imagine, when you can't hear well, you're spending a lot of energy trying to pick up what somebody is saying, and it leads to a lot of what we call auditory fatigue. The brain literally gets tired. It's a lot of work to try and pick up these sounds. And everybody here probably knows somebody with a hearing loss, or maybe you yourself have a hearing loss. And so you can relate to how difficult this can be. More recent research has also shown that hearing loss is associated with cognitive decline, often called dementia, because our brain is used to getting stimulus from what we hear. And when it doesn't get that stimulus, it starts to atrophy. And so we actually do get some what we call cognitive decline. And there are lots of research around this link. Social isolation, that is probably fairly obvious, but when people tend to have a hearing loss and difficulty communicating, they're less likely to want to go out, less likely to want to go to busy restaurants. And so they tend to withdraw and be more isolated. There can be financial hardships, of course. Hearing aids and all the services are very expensive. Tinnitus is that ringing in the ears, and that is often associated with noise-induced hearing loss, and it can be very disconcerting to those who have it. Stress and cardiovascular disease, again, newer research is showing that when we are surrounded by sound, it increases our stress response in our body. Our cortisol and our adrenaline and all of these stress hormones are elevated because we are accustomed to listening for a fight or flight response. If you're asleep and something is loud and wakes you up, it doesn't even have to be loud. It could be somebody, if you hear a creak in your floor, you could actually feel like you need to react, and you get the stress response. And we'll carry on. This is to the next slide. Yeah, so this is just a picture. Noise-induced cardiovascular disease is the term. And here's just the more complex image of it. And we can carry on. So noise itself. So that's really the impact that noise has on hearing. But what is noise? Well, there's a bunch of different definitions, of course, but WorkSafe BC very clearly defines it as noise that will cause damage to the ear. And so there's, based upon research and evidence, that 85 dBA for an 8-hour period can cause noise-induced hearing loss. There's a little note here about ototoxicants as well, and I think Dorian will be elaborating a little bit about ototoxicants, so I won't belabor that, but those can impact how much noise actually affects the ears as well. So let's unpack this 85 dBA LEX a little bit. If you want to, we can keep on carrying on with the slides. So decibels are a logarithmic scale. You've heard about the Richter scale, like earthquakes. So they are not linear. Every 3 decibels doubles the intensity. So when we talk about 85 dBA, 88 is twice as intense as 85. So it's not intuitive, but every 3 dB doubles it. And that's important to understand. The dBA is just a filter we use to mimic the ear. And this is also important that we're always talking about averaged over an 8-hour period. Carry on. So here is our graph that shows, if you look at the 8 hours for 85 dBA, for example, and then you can see that, as I mentioned, 88 dB is twice as intense as 85. Therefore, it's only safe for half the amount of time. So for 4 hours. And you can see that this extrapolates as you go through all of the different levels here. So these are all considered 85 dBA LEX because they are all the same as 85 decibels for 8 hours. So this is really where we start to see that damage can happen to the ear is at any of these levels for that amount of time. So the duration and the intensity work together and cannot be separated. If you want to carry on to the next slide. So this is just really to point out that it's the same graph again, of course, but that often we underestimate the amount of damage that can be caused by some of the lower levels of noise. So at the top of the graph, 82, 83, those are not painful. They might be annoying. You don't feel like they're causing damage. But if you have a longer shift, which I think many people do, they work for longer than 8 hours, that can also be causing the same amount of damage as the 85 decibels for 8 hours. And on the other end, sometimes we also can dismiss the impact that a really short duration noise could cause. But if it's loud enough, it can cause damage very, very quickly and almost immediately. So just keeping in mind that this relationship between intensity and duration cannot be taken apart. They belong together. And I think one more slide. And as a rule of thumb, if you're ever wondering sort of what 85 dBA LEX is, 85 decibels is about, if you have to raise your voice to talk to somebody who's an arm length away or a meter away, then that's right when you're around that 85 dB. And sometimes they say like sort of traffic noise, if you're on a busy street corner, that's sort of your 85. Again, it's not painful, but if you are exposed for 8 hours and you're doing that every day, then it will cause hearing loss. So that's just sort of a rule of thumb if you're wondering sort of how to interpret this in your daily life or at your work, of course. I think we can carry on. And it's over to Dorian.
Awesome. Thank you, Sasha. So I do want to dive right into a bit of a sound chart following up on Sasha's last chart there. This one's a little more specific to the arts entertainment industry. You can see that, that duration and intensity is exceeded in a lot of those tasks that we do. Obviously, our presence at rock concerts and sporting events and things like that. And in the filming world, right, we're always filming with different props and things like motorcycles and generators, and we're working in different sites like train yards and airports and things like that. So we are exposed to some very high decibel rating noises, and oftentimes for a long duration. So it's a good chart to take a look at there. And then moving into the follow-up piece of that, even our performers are at risk. So this little study done by Sharp Sound goes into the sounds of musicians. So classical musicians, choir singers, they can be exposed to very high damaging levels of sound between 80 and 100 dBAs. And then when you go into the rock musician category, they're about 90 to 105 dBAs, and then higher still at those really intense peak rock concerts. There's many risks associated with sitting near loud instruments and amplified music, and that can be much louder again. And that's where on that last graph I showed you, it can actually peak all the way at 140. And so you can think the duration that we're allowed to or should be hanging out in that area is a very, very small amount of time. So again, the risk does increase with the duration of exposure, which not only includes in the performance, but also the practice, the setup, the workplace, sound checks and things like that. And we got to start thinking about our non-musicians in these cases who work in those entertainment videos, or venues, sorry, and also their increased risk of these same hazards. I do want to give you some tools to start doing a little bit of hearing loss prevention yourself, right? I've already gone ahead and identified some sources for you, but I do want to provide you with a bit of a step-by-step procedure to getting started with hearing conservation, right? And it can be broken down into steps. If you go through your workplace and you identify those sounds and vibrations, I mean, that's step one. You're already on your way. We need to also be looking at things like aerodynamic flow, and that's going to be the path that the sound travels through your workplace. And once you've done those two steps, you're going to start measuring that noise level, because the sources I provided to you in that last slide are just averages, right? We need sources that are specific to your workplace, and then we need to go ahead and sequence those sources from highest to lowest. And once you get those sources, you're going to compare those measured dBAs to the time-weighted average exposure limits and any existing noise reduction ratings that you might have with your hearing protection. And then you want to calculate the necessary required sound reduction on top of that. With that, you're going to identify other controls by assessing any operational requirements, productivity restraints, and cost. And then we want to aim for significant noise reduction by controlling the most dominant source first. So that's where that highest to lowest list is going to come into place. And then how do you do this and how do you follow through with this? You're going to do it by creating that hearing conservation program. And it needs to be specific to your workplace with the noises that you identified. So you might have a similar workplace. You might know of a similar production or a similar venue. We unfortunately need to do it specifically for our own workplace. Jumping into a hearing conservation program, you might not know what it might include, but it does have some elements to it. You're going to have hazard ID and noise exposure monitoring involved. You're going to be specifically focusing on some engineering control methods. And that's going to be straight out of that hierarchy of controls, which we're going to dive into in our couple slides. You need hearing protection devices included in this program. And again, it's another part of this webinar we're going to go over today. You need audiometric testing, right, for those workers exposed above that 85 dBA. You need noise hazard communication and warnings, education training, and record keeping. And then you need to continually monitor and improve that program. I do want to stop in at some of these elements to get you on your way. Education and training may include the following information. We want to know when and why we should be wearing protective equipment and in what areas and how to select it, right? And what type of hearing protectors. We all know how to take care of that protective equipment, storage, cleaning, and maintenance, which we're going to get into a bit today, and company policy requirements for noise control and hearing conservation. And lastly, you should be looking at those legislative requirements. As this is part of many legislations, it is very important to familiarize yourself with those, with the CSA standard, with the WorkSafe BC standard, so that you're doing these things on an average of every 2 years. Okay, moving into record keeping. It's not practical to reduce the noise below those exposure limits, and the employer needs to have some warning signs when that's the case, right? There are times when noise is noise, and we need to make sure that the workers know that it exists, right? There's a little bit of rules around that as well, and obviously gaps out in the industry and everywhere you go. You don't see enough signage. You don't know about the noise until you hear it, right? How many times have you walked into an environment and then just been hit with the noise first without ever seeing any signage or warnings, right? There's three types of signage you do need to provide, and it's dependent on what level of sound that it exceeds. So you'll notice there we have 80, 85, and 105. Each of them, with their own specific warning, but you'll notice as the decibel level goes up, it does start to include hearing protection and then dual protection. So those are great example signages of what needs to be hanging around your workplace when you have noise in it. A little bit about record keeping and what it may include. Hazard ID is key, right? You're already doing this hazard ID. You've identified those sounds, like we said in that last slide. You need to include that, along with those risk assessments and then any reassessments. And those are what happens once you've actually put those controls into place and reassessed your hazard, right? You want to make sure that you keep records that are, proving your adherence to legislation, including those audiometric testing results. And a shout out to having WorkSafe BC as a resource for us, because they got a lovely portal there that holds all of those test results for you. We also need to record keep our control measures and their effectiveness, right? How good are they at reducing risk? And that's what that reassessment is also going to help you provide. Any continual review, monitoring of existing and producing equipment, and then your education and training records, of course. I've also developed a few questions for you to consider when you're touching on your hearing conservation program. I recommend that you take a look at some of these, walk through your workplace, and give your current program a review, right? In a year's time, you want to use that same list of questions that I've provided for you to really find out how you've progressed, how you maybe need to change your existing controls, how your program needs to get itself better. The review should focus on noise measurements, engineering controls, hearing protection, education and training, and then those hearing test results. Like I mentioned, we wanted to touch on this hierarchy of controls, right? Hearing conservation program includes risk control that addresses specific noise hazards in your workplace. A risk control follows the hierarchy of controls, which allows risks to be mitigated effectively. What I want to do today is apply that to our industry, of course, and I want to do it with hearing conservation in mind. So what do we have here? A bit of a hierarchy controls that's very specific to the motion picture, performing arts, live entertainment industry. When you're walking through your workplace and you're looking at elimination, you need to start asking those questions. Does this explosion need to really happen during filming? Why can't we just eliminate it, add it in post, right? Substitution. Why is this equipment we're using for load in maybe a gas forklift that's really loud? Easy fix, substitute that out for some electrics, right? Moving to engineering control, right? Are we just going to be recording audio today? Can we move this to maybe a filming or a sound booth, recording booth, right? Diving into admin controls. Can these noisy jobs be shared at different times? Think about the way of maybe a venue's laid out. We have the ability to rotate those workers backstage, front of house, and we also can ask to maybe move around some of those noisy tasks and jobs like sound check times, right? Let's get our workers out of the noisy environment if we can. And then lastly, there is the PPE, right? And this one is the last resort, but we need to at least make sure that our workers are having the right PPE for the job, and then they are wearing and maintaining it as they should. And then to really knock home that audiometric testing today, we need to make sure that they're getting their annual testing done. So send those workers over to SureHire or any other approved vendors for that hearing testing. We did develop some, control options for you and some ideas behind it. When we're talking about elimination, substitution, and engineering, we need to start looking at things like new equipment and a procurement policy. When we look at old equipment, we need to be thinking about upgrades and how we can silence or muffle that noise. When we look at enclosures in our industry, we got to look at, like I said, those places that can be enclosed in spaces in rooms like sound recording booths. These enclosures, they can be total or partial, but it's important to note that if you can't enclose the activity, then you maybe are enclosing the worker itself, right? Workers can then be operating this from an isolated room where it's nice and quiet for them. And then a couple others, which are actually present in industry often, is isolation, which is reducing sound transmitted through vibrations, and acoustic barriers. So you'll actually see those in a lot of venues already where acoustics have been considered. A lot of large, venues, auditoriums, a lot of the walls will already have some of those dampening acoustic barriers installed. I also wanted to stop in and talk about reverberation a little bit today. It is present in our industry and one that is not thought about often. We have many old style venues that have very poor, sound radiation reduction and things like that. Like I said, some of them do take that into consideration, but some don't. So I want you to imagine a bit today that you're setting up a speaker in a room, in a venue, and I want you to think about reverberation. So what happens when noise is created inside of an enclosure? It hits a hard reflective surface and then bounces back and reverberates through the room. And this actually can overpower the original sound that was transmitted. And it does have a bit of a rhyme to the reason. For each reflective surface that it is close by, that it bounces off, it actually increases that sound by 3 decibels. So you'll see with speaker placement 1, its closest surface is the floor. It's got an increase of 3 decibels. When you move it over to the wall there, now we're at 6 decibels. It's got the floor and the wall. And then when you set it up in the corner, like number 3, you have an increase of 9 decibels with the floor and the 2 walls that it's set up beside. So we do really need to start thinking of how our workspaces are set up and how our performances are being set up, because it can have an everlasting effect with our hearing. Do you have some administrative controls I do want to quickly touch on as well? We talked about implementing that hearing conservation program and all of the things that come with it. But I think specifically for our industry, we need to start looking at those preventative maintenance programs, and we need to include frequent inspections of any noise generating equipment. So you need to focus on the identifying, lubricating, and replacing of any worn out or loose parts. And again, I went ahead and started to think about some of our industry-specific considerations today. So I have a list here of some things that are pretty common in our industry where we really need to start looking out for, right? What about those special effects and those pyrotechnics and those firearms, right? Those are obviously areas that need PPE. They need controls in place. When you move on to some of our filming locations, some of the areas that we work in, we need proper training to be working in these areas. We need to start thinking about when we're filming, how long we're going to be there, how noisy are those locations, and what kind of controls can we put in place? Do we need to put everybody there? How vulnerable of an environment is that over and above the noise concern, right? So some of those things need to be considered. Again, that high performance audio, another ripe opportunity for control measures, engineering and administrative controls. We could really, schedule people to be away from this performance audio when they don't need to be. And when they are, they can easily have their PPE. Other things that don't get considered, some of the vehicles and equipment we use, and then some of the things that we use to construct props and stages. These types of machines and these types of equipment have constant noise, right? It's accumulative and it leads to hearing loss. This is actually chronic hearing loss that comes from these things like table saws, nail guns, welding, grinding tools, forklifts, and things like that. A lot of it can just be maintained or upgrades can be purchased, right? A shout out to the riggers and grips. Obviously, we're dealing with trussing and scaffolding all the time. How many times have you heard a hammer ring off of a truss, right? We need to start thinking about the tools that we're using and how we're using them. Is there a way to dampen that noise? Is there a way to reduce that resonating pitch by switching from a metal hammer down to a rubber hammer, something of that nature? And then portable radios. How many times have you walked into a site and somebody has that radio right against their ear on full blast, right? We need to definitely get some controls in place that get people knowing about how dangerous that radio volume is. And as mentioned, I did want to have a brief little note on autotoxic chemicals. These are present in things like printing, painting, construction, fueling vehicles and vehicle exhaust, and discharging firearms. It's really important to note that these chemicals, when they are produced and you're exposed to loud noises, this can cause more hearing damage than either the noise or the chemical itself. So when they're in contribution together, they're very dangerous for our hearing. Lastly, PPE, and we're going to move into a WorkSafe's presentation on this one, but we need to remember with PPE that it is a last resort. And I do want to go into more detail on it. There's certain things that we need to remember with PPE. It is relying heavily on human factors, the fact that our workers are remembering how to wear it, how to fix it, how to maintain it, to bring it, to inspect it, to clean it, to things like that, right? I'm going to hand it over to Sasha to elaborate on PPE today.
Great, thank you. I want to hire you to talk about the hierarchy of controls. That was excellent, and to bring the focus away from PPE and away from hearing protection, and think about reducing the duration of exposure and reducing the actual intensity of the exposure. So, but having said that, that's not always practicable. And so sometimes, many times, we do actually need to rely upon hearing protection devices as well. So this is straight from the regulation. It's a lot of words to basically say that, that the employer's responsibility is to provide hearing protection, to make sure it's maintained, and to make sure that it's worn effectively. And so that's really the crux of it. We can carry on to the next slide. And so we'll pause here just for a moment, and then we'll kind of blast through a bunch of slides. But this is, I think everybody has seen hearing protection before. Everybody's seen these different kinds of hearing protection before. Just be aware there are so many different types of hearing protection, including there are, like, I think at last count, over 3,000 different earplugs and 500 different earmuffs. So there are many types. When we talk about them, of course, there are the earmuffs that that you see and we're fairly aware of. Foam earplugs, are those compressible kind. They are not one size fits all. If I have one single message that you walk away with today, it is that earplugs are not one size fits all. When you get a single box, they will fit, I'm going to say, about a third of the people, if maybe that. They don't fit my ears. They're not going to fit many of your ears. So just to be aware of, and they have to be worn properly. There are the kind of hearing protection on the bottom left that they say non-foam earplugs on this, and they have a little stem that you push into your ear. So that's something else that people tend to not be as aware of. They are reusable, so they can be washed and reused. And then the canal caps that you see with the band, sometimes called banded earplugs. Those are, I think, underutilized as well. The band is something you can wear under your chin or behind your neck. And if you are in a situation where you're in and out of noise frequently, then it's a pretty easy way to do that. They also provide a little bit less protection, which is often a good thing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So this is just to sort of orient you to what, again, I think everybody has seen all these different types. Oh, and custom molded earplugs too, of course, that is always an option as well. I'll probably get Dorian to go through the next slides fairly quickly, but the points I want to make are that there are many factors involved in selecting the hearing protection device. We'll talk in a bit about choosing a hearing protection for the level, for the amount of noise exposure or the type of noise exposure. But I think most important is the second bullet, which is the comfort. if hearing protection is not comfortable, people will not wear it. And that means that they're not being protected, or they'll wear it partially, take it out a little bit. So it's really important that it's comfortable. And maybe I'll get you to kind of just go through the slides fairly quickly here, Dorian, and I'll speak to them as we go through. So yeah, I'll definitely talk more about the level and type of noise exposure. We'll be discussing the different ways of rating hearing protection. And then our next point, we've got these are great for impulse noise. So these are active level dependent, often used for what we call tactical. So they're really good for even, hammering nails, things like that, any kind of impulse. These are great because they allow you to listen to background noise at a normal level or even an amplified level when it is not hazardous, and then they become hearing protectors when it is. Carry on. And again, comfort's really important, not one size fits all. And in order for hearing protection to be comfortable, that also means not providing too much hearing protection. Communication requirements, there's ones that you can use that will amplify somebody that's right in front of you. Of course, there's radio connectivity. I hope what you're getting from this is that there are hearing protection devices that will address any situation. And I'm not going to be able to go through all of them today, but I also hope that you get my contact information and you can contact me at any point if you do need more information. We can keep on carrying on here. This is the quick, every hearing protection out there. So other PPE, if somebody's wearing a hard hat, you want to have hearing protection that will work with the hard hat. There are the kind that go behind the neck, and then you wear a band over the head to support the weight. Then you can wear a hard hat. They can be mounted right. There's some that can be mounted right on. If somebody has safety eyewear, they need to have hearing protection that will not interfere with the safety eyewear, and vice versa. Thick bands will break the seal of your earmuffs, for example. And if air can get in, sound can get in. So that's something to be aware of. Individual factors around, can carry on here. Yeah. So if somebody has a hearing loss, then putting hearing protection on can make them feel very isolated and unsafe. So there again, we're looking at these amplified hearing protection devices that work extremely well to amplify the parts of the sound that is not hazardous, while at the same time protecting from the microseconds of sound that might be. So it actually does a very, very good job. Or wearing less hearing protection in those situations, of course, in order to not block out sounds that people need to hear. And musicians' earplugs are also something to be aware of, especially in an industry that involves music in many cases, but certainly involves communication. And musicians' earplugs, they equally block the frequency range. Compared to other hearing protection that tends to cut out the higher pitches or higher frequencies more and makes a less natural sound. So the musicians' earplugs are always a good option to consider as well. And we'll carry on a little bit more. Class B, we'll talk about class after. So environmental factors, this is fairly obvious. Climate, if it's hot, you might be better off wearing earplugs. If it's cold, you might be better off wearing earmuffs. If you're wearing earmuffs and it's cold though, they cannot be worn over toques or beanies. I see it all the time, but that breaks the seal as well. So something to be aware of. So again, that was my quick, and there's a hearing protection device for any situation you find yourself in. But again, that was, covering a lot of information. I think Dorian already showed an image of the sound advice. It's a very good document, has a lot of information. What I'll draw your attention to is that it does explain the different ratings of hearing protection devices that are used to help us know what hearing protection to wear in what noisy environment. I think you can flip to the next one more. Yeah. So really simplifying it, the NRR, which Dorian has mentioned, class, which is what we tend to prefer in Canada. It simplifies the selection a little bit. And then the personal attenuation rating, and we'll talk a little bit about those. So the noise reduction rating, it's commonly referred to because it's an American system. So, and many of our products are manufactured in the US, and so they have this rating on them. It's not intuitive. the number does not mean how much attenuation or protection that hearing protector is providing. So it's really important to understand that there's a D-rating formula. I won't bore you with all those details right now. It's in sound advice if you feel like working through them. But as a rule of thumb, earplugs provide less than half of the NRR, and earmuffs provide just under 70%. And then again, it's slightly more complicated when you're looking at dual protection. But just knowing that the number does not represent the amount of protection it's providing. And there's a real misnomer about that. If you want to carry on. And this is why. The blue is what the NRR of these devices is, and these are a whole bunch of different kinds of earmuffs and earplugs. And the red is what they are actually providing to people out and about in the field. You can see that what people are actually getting from the hearing protection is very different from the NRR. So again, you can't use the NRR, you have to use this D-rating to give yourself a sense. And if we want to go to the next one. So class is what we tend to prefer in Canada. This is from the CSA standard. And it really, I like those signs that you showed, Dorian, because they really represented this. They showed that when you are, above a certain level, the one sign said 85, you have to wear hearing protection. Above 105, you need dual. And that really is what this is about. It's about what class of hearing protection device do you need to wear in any given environment. And so many will also show the class as well. And again, it's definitely my preference, but we have to live with the NRR. So I want to carry on. Personal attenuation rating is fit testing. So this is a relatively new-ish way for somebody to know exactly how much protection their hearing protector is providing. There are a variety of providers that will do this testing for you, or employers can purchase these units as well. So this is how you know for every person, what their individual rating is for any hearing protector. So this is the best. This is really the gold standard, but it's not always available. But to be aware of, because it is becoming more common. And on to the next. So cleaning and maintaining, pretty straightforward. The disposable kind are meant to be disposable. You can reuse them a little bit. You can brush them off. If they are made of plastic, you can wash them and reuse them until they no longer seem to fit properly. And of course, they need to be stored effectively as well and replaced when they're not working. And we'll go on to the next. Earmuffs, very similar. Check the cushions, see if they're worn out, see if they're creased, see if they have any cracks in them, and they can often be replaced without replacing the entire earmuffs. So you can actually just replace the cushions. But of course, if the band is no longer providing tension, you might need to replace the entire set. But it's worth checking on a regular basis. And on to the next. So hearing tests. This is my favorite. I think hearing tests are the most important part of an entire hearing conservation program. And I will tell you why, but this is the regulation again. So tests have to be done within 6 months of being hired, and then again every 12 months. And for industries that might have workers for fewer than 6 months, they are still required to have their hearing tested within that 6 months. Or if people are kind of coming and going out of BC, if they are in BC for even less than 6 months, they still are required to be tested. So that's just something to be aware of as well. If you want to carry on. So this is my image to show why I like hearing tests so much. And that is, we did some analysis at WorkSafe, and we studied the whether or not, or the frequency with which somebody had hearing tests, and then whether or not they ended up with a noise-induced hearing loss claim. And this probably isn't surprising, but the more hearing tests somebody got throughout their career, the less likely they were to have a hearing loss claim. And, it kind of goes to show that if you get tested and you realize that you're showing signs of a noise-induced hearing loss, you might do something about it. You take some action and you work to prevent it. It's also employers who have access to these hearing test results and who they're ultimately for. It's their way of measuring or seeing whether or not the efforts, the hearing conservation efforts that Dorian really described so well, that whether or not they are working. If you're seeing signs of a noise-induced hearing loss, you know that you need to make some changes. So this is really the measure of whether or not what you as an individual are doing, if it's your hearing test, or as an organization, whether or not the measures you've taken are actually working. So hearing tests are, again, for me, probably one of the most important elements of the hearing conservation program. I'm going to carry on. This is just for employers. This is our website, just to show that we don't just say get a hearing test. We say get a hearing test, and here's what you do with the results. What do you need to know about these hearing test results? And so we do have these this available on our website. And this will be a nice segue into Tara, but industrial audiometric testers, they provide hearing tests. They submit the hearing test results to WorkSafe BC, and this is a really good time for them to look over your hearing protection devices and give you some recommendations. Something to be aware of is that it's not a diagnostic test. It is a screening test. And so it can tell you a little bit about your hearing, and we certainly are looking for flags of noise-induced hearing loss. And you might get referred for a more robust diagnostic test based upon it, but just sort of to be aware of what the test actually is. And it's really meant to be a flag for, is noise potentially having an impact on your hearing? And I will hand it over to Tara.
Thanks, Sasha. Perfect. Yeah, we can go to the next slide there, Dorian. Yeah, so I'm going to touch base a little bit on the effects of the hearing loss, which Sasha also mentioned, but hearing loss might affect someone a little bit more than you think. Everyday activities on and off the work site, we're exposed to loud noises. So just being aware of what your off the job exposure might also be, or is also critical, just as much as being aware of those on the job exposures. As Sasha mentioned, like how long you're exposed to loud noises will affect your any hearing loss damage that you might have. So just because you're no longer at work, the activities you're taking part in outside of work will also be compounding on that exposure. So take some time to start thinking about what those hobbies or interests are that you participate in outside of the workplace that would be potentially exposing you to hazardous noise. So think hunting and firearms, concerts. I know Dorian mentioned concerts, even wearing earbuds. Often, you see individuals these days wearing with one earbud in all day long. So even though that might not be very loud, they're being exposed to that noise. And Sasha mentioned it too, that noise fatigue is a real thing. So hazardous exposure isn't always dependent on how loud that noise is, but also the length of the exposure. Stay back there, Dorian. The physiological effects could also be like high blood pressure, chronic headaches, tinnitus, just to name a few. As mentioned as well, communication can be affected. So if you can't effectively communicate because you have hearing loss, people tend to misunderstand things, become frustrated, which may lead into social withdrawal. And then as Sasha also mentioned, like cognitive abilities are affected. So things like memory, attention, which may lead also to dementia over time. And just your emotional wellness as well can be affected with hearing loss. So difficulties understanding and expressing your own thoughts and emotions, but then also difficulty interpreting others' emotions, which then could just lead to even more social isolation or avoidance. And research does suggest as well that hearing loss is associated to increased risk of depression, anxiety, and just overall mental health. So as you can see, there's a lot of things in play here. And if you're not managing your hearing loss appropriately or maintaining the hearing levels that you have now, you can see how your quality of life, your overall quality of life could likely be affected. So Dorian, you can move on to the next slide. So I don't have too much to talk about hearing conservation programs, as everybody's really touched base on that, but I want to just kind of reiterate the benefits of a hearing conservation program, especially as it relates to the employer and the employee. So hearing conservation benefits for the employer is that those test results of your workers' hearing evaluations will show year to year how effective those noise control measures are that you're putting in place. So this will also guide you in as you reevaluate your elements of your hearing conservation program from year to year. So making sure that those hierarchy of controls that you've put in place are doing what you're intended to do. Also, annual hearing testing is relatively inexpensive, especially if your noise control measures are adequately reducing those harmful noises. So employers with significant number or high hearing loss claims face increased premiums and financial burdens for years based on a high amount of claims. And then just as mentioned as well, compliance. So hearing conservation programs are required when your workers are exposed to 85 dBA LEX. So the legislation also states that hearing testing must be completed as early as possible, but within 6 months of employment. So just being compliant is also a huge part for the employer. So moving on to the employees' benefits, so you can change slides. As the employee, you'd be provided with an explanation of your test results year after year, which is going to really give you a good understanding of what your own hearing abilities are and the importance of maintaining those. Your hearing results, again, are not diagnostic. They are just there to detect, but they may assist to detect early signs of noise-induced hearing loss, and even before you may notice it yourself. The test results will also inform you of your current, will help to inform if your current hearing protection devices are appropriate or not for the exposure level that you're at, as well as based on your existing hearing levels. And as mentioned too, your industrial audiometric technician will guide you through the proper selection, how to use them, how to wear them, how to care for your hearing protection devices. And your test results may also indicate a need for follow-up with a medical professional, such as a family doctor or an audiologist, as there could also be underlying medical conditions that may be affecting your hearing as well. And then we can move on to the next slide. We have a short video here that you can see. I'm just going to speak over top of it, but in most cases, when you're booking your appointments with SureHire, your employer will book the appointments for you. In some cases, you might be able to book it yourself, but in the facility, if you're going in for testing, you're going to get a confirmation email or text message with further instructions. Or if we're doing a mobile testing, such as this video that you're looking at right now, the confirmation of your appointment will actually go to the employer who's done the request, as they're going to do more of the coordination and logistics. But once you're preparing to attend your appointment, you'll have to complete some paperwork, including consent and health hearing questionnaire. Once you attend your appointment, we're going to just confirm some personal information and can make sure your paperwork is complete. Our industrial audiometric technicians will make sure that they provide you with information about why we're doing the test and how to complete the test, including making sure you're pushing the button at the right time during testing. And then you'll be placed in a sound booth with the door closed, earphones or headphones on for about 3 to 5 minutes. Following the test, we'll also provide you with your test results and guide you through proper hearing protection, selection, care, maintenance. We do ask that you bring your hearing protection, the ones you like to wear or commonly wear, so that we can work through that with you directly and kind of give you more further information and advice. And then during testing, we'll obviously answer any questions that you might have. As this video also shows, we do mask fitting. I believe some respirator fit testing might be involved as well when you're experiencing the SureHire testing. And then at any time during your experience with SureHire, whether it's looking for questions around bookings, results, or the testing experience, we have dedicated departments that can help you for that. And that was it. So off to Dorian to kind of complete the webinar.
Thank you. That's great. I like that little walkthrough. I feel like I was there. I feel like I just got my hearing tested. Am I good? Can I wait another year now or what? Okay, let's move into that Q&A period. We've definitely witnessed some questions coming in the chat here, so we want to get right to it. First one we have, what type of sound exposure leads to tinnitus? Like impact, impulse, example, power accumulated tools such as a Hilti gun.
I can take that one. So any kind of noise exposure, all of the above. So it can be impulse, impact, or steady state. It's often associated with long-term steady state. So again, sort of that 85 dBA, LAX over 8 hours a day for 40 years. So yeah, it can be any kind of noise. And having said that, sometimes people can get tinnitus from noise and not have an associated hearing loss, and sometimes people can get hearing loss from noise and not have tinnitus. So the two aren't always together, but there is a correlation, and we do see more tinnitus when somebody has had significant noise exposure of any kind.
Awesome, thank you. Next, will we get a copy of this recording? Yes, you will. It'll get sent via email. Next question. Can hearing aids be used for noise-induced hearing losses and be calibrated to accommodate varied damage to the hair cells in the cilia? Noise-induced hearing loss disproportionately impacts certain frequencies. My understanding is that hearing aids just take a garbled sound and make it louder.
Yeah, so I can take this one as well. So yes, in some ways you're right. So first of all, hearing aids can be programmed and are always programmed to amplify sounds in the areas, in the frequencies that the person needs. So they are specific to that hearing loss. So that they help. But as you've noted, if you have damaged hair cells that are not able to pick up that frequency, that specific sound that you're missing, making it louder isn't going to bring back those hair cells. What's going to happen is that the hair cells that are closest, that are still standing upright and intact, those ones are going to respond, but they're not the right ones. And so it does end up with a less clear. So hearing aids aren't like glasses that you put on and can see clearly. They do amplify the sound, but they cannot replace the clarity or bring back the clarity. So that is, you're right. What you heard is correct. They can help a lot. I don't want to say that hearing aids don't help, because they can certainly help, but they don't fix the hearing loss.
Interesting. Okay, I think we got another one for you, Sasha. This one's in regards to children, as all these numbers are classified for the adult workforce. But at what age group do these DBA scales factor in for our children's safety? When does a child's hearing stop developing and become classified as an adult?
At birth. So the cochlea, the hearing system, is fully formed in utero. It's one of the first things that is formed in the fetus. And so at birth, the cochlea is operating like an adult cochlea. So all of these numbers also relate to children. You often see that people take it more seriously with children. You'll see, little kids wearing their earmuffs at sporting events or venues, which is fantastic. But their ears are no more sensitive. But you really, of course, we don't want noise-induced hearing loss at any age. And if we can, prevent it in children, then that's very helpful. And that goes for, I think, Tara had mentioned, listening devices as well. And we are seeing younger people wearing their AirPods and wearing devices throughout the day. So that's definitely a concern.
Sure. That's interesting. I didn't know that either. Thank you. Next, maybe for Tara, what if our employer does not opt to offer hearing testing? How can we still get tested?
Yeah, absolutely. With SureHire, you can still book an appointment privately without having an employer account. The requirement would just be that you could contact SureHire's contact center, request your appointment. And we have testing facilities all across Canada, including 15 of our own SureHire owned bricks and mortar power centers across North America. But once you book your appointment, if you don't have an employer account, then you just pay for your appointment at the time of booking and then attend your appointment. And all of your results will still be posted through the SureHire or SureLink portal that we have. But if you're testing for a WorkSafe BC program and you're booking through SureHire, then your results will be posted in the WorkSafe BC portal. We just on our end, it just says go visit the WorkSafe BC portal for your results. Because as Dorian mentioned, it is a very fantastic portal.
Amazing. Thank you. I got one here that we didn't really dive into, but I can comment on, and maybe Sasha as well. But how do we measure and find the dBA exposure of a worker or a workplace that has constantly changing sound levels, like in a theater where the PA speakers are on, or during a show, different activities going on? Yeah, there are a variety. We didn't dive into sound level meters today and docile meters, but there are personal devices that workers can wear. They have different ratings, different levels, and what will happen is they'll take multiple sound level recordings throughout the day, so that you can really see, how that worker may have increased or decreased their sound level, their noise level as they went throughout their day, as they did different activities. Is there something else we can add on to that, Sasha?
No, that's true. So yeah, the answer would be a decimeter, which is exactly as you've described. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Just going down the list here. We got lots of good questions. Are there guidelines about retrofitting or refitting and replacing custom-made earplugs? How long is a mold of an ear typically accurate for?
So I can answer that. It can be for a lifetime, or if somebody gains or loses weight, the ear canal can also change. So in those cases, you might need to redo the ear molds. The ear molds themselves, if they become damaged or brittle, then they would need to be replaced. But otherwise, you want to look at them probably at least every 5 years, but you don't necessarily need to replace them every 5 years if either you or the ear mold hasn't changed.
Awesome. Maybe over to Tara for this one. Is testing very expensive? Can we give some insight? I know you mentioned, it was very cost effective, but is testing very expensive?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're booking through ActSafe, I believe there's going to be a client account. So I actually don't have that pricing. I'm not sure if that's available to me yet, but our standard pricing for like a private donor, or sorry, a private worker would be, I'm just looking this up now. Looks like it's $26.25 in BC for WorkSafe BC testing, but I could be wrong.
Amazing. And SureHire is one of the vendors that we approved for the industry, so they will honor industry rates for our workers. So that's great. Another great question that gets asked many, many times. Do sound canceling headphones help reduce hearing damage? Are they a viable alternative to PPE? Sasha, it's your favorite question, right?
I get this one all the time. So the quick answer is no, they are not hearing protection devices. They are not PPE. Noise canceling, what they tend to do is they actually send a signal out. They literally do cancel the noise. So if you've got a signal coming in and the signal, it matches it and renders it zero, but it only works for low frequency noise. So that they're great if you're sitting on an airplane and want to be comfortable, or maybe some traffic noise if you're sitting on a bus or something, but they do not work for most industrial noise or workplace noise. So that's the kind of the quick answer. The AirPods have been advertised as hearing protection devices, and they are the rating that they have been provided is 11, an NRR of 11. So if you remember that math, we're looking at, maybe they're providing about 4 dB of attenuation you can count on. And that's if the batteries are removed. So there's a little bit of a, and so take their advertising with a grain of salt, but the quick answer is no. There are hearing protection devices that you can plug music into though. So they have to be hearing protectors first, and then listening devices second. So there are options, but not your typical sort of Bose noise canceling headphones.
Awesome. Quick one. Is it law to have a hearing test from your company? Yes, it is. That's at that 85 decibel. If you're exposed to that 85 decibels, a yearly test is required to be provided by your company. Next question. I work on film sets, and my mother is a musician. When we were transferring from one room to another room in the interior, from the interior to the exterior, what is the best way to test your hearing from moving constantly indoors to outdoors when you finish a scene or moving to another location after recording? Similar to the PA question before, there are dosimeters available for that. Again, they are quite expensive. They're personal monitoring devices, but it is a must to get that testing done to know what you're being exposed to. So good question. And last question, are people that work both in volunteer run or semi-pro theaters covered the same way as via in an equity house or pro theater company? Now, I'm assuming you're asking about coverage as far as hearing tests go. So your employer would need to, yes, pay for that if you're exposed to that noise level, and you would be getting that industry rate from SureHire as well. Hope that answers your question. That's all our questions that we had come in, so we're going to move on forward. Thank you. So we do have a lot of resources for you. I know we packed a lot of info in here today, and you're going to get the recording of the webinar, but we also have lots of more resources to offer you. The performing arts live entertainment industry is getting a very specific hearing loss prevention bulletin that's going to be dropped in the coming weeks. We are going to also update existing safety bulletins to include some of this new relevant hearing loss prevention info that we've developed. And there's even plans for a new hearing conservation program template. What we have now is a WorkSafe version of that, and we basically just want to provide that to the industry with a more ActSafe industry specific lens on it, and we want to supply that to you as well in the coming months and quarters throughout this year. As always, all three of these organizations have amazing web pages. Please go to the web pages for all of their resources. ActSafe has great ones. SureHire has very great stuff dedicated to things specific to their industry and that above and beyond stuff like fit testing and things like that. And then WorkSafe BC is just a powerhouse. They got lots on there, lots of great videos you can watch. You can go on there and look over your stats. And again, mentioning that Audiometric portal where your hearing tests are going to be saved. Again, I am always available to you. I am the Regional Safety Advisor for the Interior. I am available via email for any of your questions. If we didn't get to any of the questions today, or you have anything else you want to talk about, I'd love to chat safety with you. I'm here for you. I am your safety advisor. Please contact me. And I love webinar evaluations. I love anything to do with evaluation where it can basically critique the material, the instructors, the setup, the tech, whatever it may be. If you got something to say and you have the time to do it, please take down this QR code and head out there and give us a review. And if you just want to give us a shout out, that's awesome too. I enjoyed that. So and then with a few more contact details to leave the webinar on for you to write down. Obviously, our main website, our main info email, and our phone number for us to be contacted. I hope you enjoyed that presentation today as much as I liked delivering it. I want to thank Sasha and Tara for attending as well. It was great to have them on here with all of their infinite knowledge. And I thank everybody for attending. Last but not least, I do have something to give to you. We have a feedback giveaway. So please, there's a two $25 gift cards involved in that evaluation survey. If you want to win those, head back to that survey QR code and please fill it out. Maybe you'll win $25. So have a good day, everybody. Thanks.